Hello, my name's Kathy Bissell. Welcome to the Golf Show 2.0. Several years ago, I was at the PGA Merchandise Show at the demo day, and I remember seeing a little device out on the range. It was smaller than a cell phone, but a little bit thicker. And it was an inexpensive but very adequate for most players shot tracking device. And since then, the device has turned into something a little bit larger and it does more stuff. And we have a gentleman here who's going to explain it all to us. Gary, I know you just have written some articles about it, so you're more of an expert on the state of Flightscope than I am.
Yeah, Jordan Vogler and I just talked about this last week for a story I was doing on shot tracking data apps. And Flightscope has a great app because it ties right into the Mevo Gen 2 launch monitor, which is smaller than an iPad, but just barely larger than a Kindle. And you can just take that on the course if you want, set it up 8 feet behind the ball, and it tracks the shot and it gives you the exact data on the shot. One thing you get is the actual carry, which the other ones don't give you. It's got everything, really. It's a launch mod, and you can play sim golf. I mean, I'm starting to drool just thinking about what you can do with it. But anyway, Jordan, tell us about the Gen 2 and all the things you can use it for, because it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so we launched the Flightscope Mevo Gen 2 in August of last year. It's been a very successful product for us. Like you said, Gary, it comes out of the box. It comes with 20 data parameters. Those data parameters include like carry, launch, spin, angle of attack, which is huge. And, out of the box, you get a lot of data parameters that you can use to really just go ahead and see improvements in your game. And with our product, it comes with 8 courses that you can use for free from E6 Connect. You can use that on your PC or your iPad. And like you said, this is the Mevo Gen 2, and I was comparing it to the iPad that I had before me, and it's a little bit smaller than the iPad, but it comes with this carrying case that you can use. The beauty about our product is it's used both indoors and outdoors. It's not limited to just one or the other. Okay. So if you want to take it to the range, you can take it out to the range, the putting green, the short game area out on the course, or you can bring it indoors for indoor simulation use. And in December of last year, we had a lot of customers reach out because from the original product that we had at the time, we launched this in 2020. It's the Mevo Plus, and I'll bring this out of its carrying case. So this launched in 2020, okay. And the Mevo Plus had the ability to add on Pro Package and Face Impact Location. Essentially what that means is Pro Package will give you all the club data, the D-plane data for individuals that really wants to understand why the golf ball is doing what it's doing post impact. And with our Face Impact Location, it will show you where you're hitting the ball on the club face without the need for any stickers or spray.
Oh, wow,
and
that's great.
When we launched the Gen 2, we didn't initially launch it with those features, but it was shortly after we launched, everybody was asking for it. So in December, we ended up releasing that to every single customer out there, that they can add on Face Impact Location and Pro Package to the Gen 2, and it's made it, a very successful product. This is 6-hour battery life, and it's USB-C compatible. And like I said, you can use this indoors or outdoors, anytime, day or night. And I think that's what's a really good positive about our product is, you can practice on your own terms and you can improve, anytime you want to. So that's one of the key benefits of the Flightscope Mevo Gen 2.
Yeah, and you can play sim golf on the courses you've loaded. I mean, it's such an all-purpose device. I'm thinking, you're talking about the practice area.
Yeah.
Setting up, and I can hit wedge shots, and I can try to hone in. Like, I want to fly this 50 yards or 58 yards, and I can check my data to see how far I did hit it. Whereas on a range, it's not really marked. I'm just guessing. So,
well, unless they have places where they've got it marked off 50 yards, 100 yards.
Well, hardly anybody does. They just have a range, and you probably have a flag at 100 or 150. But the shots inside 100 yards, you don't have anywhere to practice that. That's very good. At most clubs, there's some exceptions, but that's one of many things I would use it for.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of use cases from what I've seen. I was there's a golf club that's not too far from me that they bought a Mevo Plus from us back in the summertime of last year, and they ended up doing a whole indoor simulation space for their members and then their teaching facility. That's where it's located. I was just talking to them about some use cases that you can do with it because they have a lot of junior players that work on their wedge performance and wedge stuff. I said, well, you can take this outside. You can set up multiple targets out on the range is what they have and work on your wedge distances. Within the FS Golf app, no matter the temperature, you could set it to local weather conditions. So we'll take into account the weather that you're experiencing when you're outside practicing, and take into account the elevation as well. So you're going to get accurate data. And what people do is on the simulated courses, for example, a lot of the high level, juniors and collegiate players that are, playing competitively, there's a lot of software options, third-party software options that allow you to play some of those courses around the world. So if they know they're playing Kiowa Island, for example, in a tournament next week, they can go ahead and get on Kiowa Island using, the Flightscope Mevo Plus, the Mevo Gen 2, the X3C, and get a good idea beforehand what to expect on Kiowa before they actually get out to the course. And, if they're working on shot shape or just wedge control, a lot of those third-party simulation offerings offer on-course practice. So if you're working on a 100-yard shot with your lob wedge, you can set it to 100 yards on various spots on various holes and practice that, hitting over bunkers, water, and different pin locations. So it's a great way to practice, and it's a great way to help make that transition from, the range and indoor practice to seeing results out on the course using our products.
Not only that, you get to kind of preview the course if you haven't played it before, because if you see some of the Pete Dye courses for the very first time, your initial reaction is, what? Oh my God, so it gets rid of that initial confrontation that you're having with some of Pete Dye's designs, and gets you more comfortable with the look, because not everybody has played a lot of those. Also, with the changes in going from desert to Florida, the change in the humidity level, that's big, and it affects how far the ball is going to fly.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. So I played collegiate golf, and this was back in 2015-16. We had a tournament like the next week going to the Ocean Course. And, I watched, McElroy playing on TV, and how we ended up prepping then was we turned on Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2014 and played Kiowa Island on the Xbox. And I was telling my bosses that I said, I wish I had access to this technology back then, because back then, there wasn't many options to, have a personal launch monitor. I mean, you would have to spend over $20,000 to have a launch monitor, and that just is not feasible for a lot of people. So nowadays you get access to simulation, you get access to accurate data, both indoors and outdoors. And, the starting price for the Mevo Gen 2, again, 20 data parameters out of the box with 8 courses that you can use for free, it's $12.99. But if you fully unlock it with all the club data, the face impact location software, you're looking at like $2,200, $2,300. And like I said, 10 years ago, you would never find anything in that type of price point that you can use both indoors and outdoors. So yeah, it's been a great product for us. People ask us, how does these products compare to our like tour level launch monitor? This is our X3C. This is the big boy. Accuracy wise, you'll get the same data on the X3C, the tour level launch monitor, as you do with the Mevo Plus and the Mevo Gen 2. So you get the same club data, the same deep plane data that you can add on as you get with the X3C. So
yeah, well, they're using 3D Doppler radar to track the shots, correct? So
yep, it's a mixture of radar and camera. So I can go into a whole explanation on the positives and negatives of just standalone camera and standalone radar, but each offering has benefits to both. So we our founder and CEO, Henry, when he came up with this technology, he used the best of both worlds so that you get the most accurate data possible using our products, both indoors and outdoors.
Well, most of the other data apps, you either estimate the shot or it tracks it by you hit a shot. Then when you hit the next shot, it knows how far you were from your last shot. So it knows how far that shot went. It went 170 yards, but how much of it, was in the air? Maybe I hit a ground ball.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you input the data of your round after the fact, either between holes or after the round. And that's what I like about the radar is it got the exact everything on the shot. And the other apps aren't going to have that information.
And I'll tell this story too, what I told you last week, Gary. A lot of people, when they see the full data offering, when you fully unlock the product, on the dashboard, you'll get a ton of data parameters that you'll see at once. And a lot of like golfers that maybe, let's just say 15 plus handicaps, they'll look at all that data and get a little bit confused. Like, where do I start? They might get overwhelmed with a lot of the data parameters that's offered. I tell people you can make it as simplistic or as complicated as you want. For example, we have a couple LPGA Tour players on staff for us. Two, for example, is Megan Kang, Allison Corpos. They grew up playing junior golf, amateur golf, collegiate golf, and now they travel with each other on, the LPGA Tour schedule. When I was doing a demo with them with the X3C going over the data parameters, Megan Kang looked at it and said, she just smiled and shook her head. She said, all I wanted to see is carry, launch, and spin, and maybe just a few others. She said, I'm a field player, but I want to back up my fields. I said, okay, in the app, you can tailor it just to show those couple data parameters that you want to see. Allison Corpos, on the other hand, who I found out has about 5 different master's degrees, said, I want all the data parameters. If there's any way you can give me more, please add more. And I said, well, you can show all the data parameters that you can get, as far as like the club data, D-plane data, horizontal, vertical swing plane, all that. You can have access to all of it. So you can really tailor it to fit, the type of golfer that you are and where you want to eventually get to, where you want to get to be at the, end of the year or throughout the end of your practice sessions.
I'm going to have to interview Allison and find out more about those master's degrees. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And she, it's her data-driven mindset and performance and practice, it's paid off pretty well for her. She's a major champion. And,
Yep.
During this interview, I think she finished top 10 last week as she started off the season. So, it works for her. So, but, again, you can make this as complicated or as simplistic as you want it. I always tell people the average golfer that gets this, they ask, where do I start? I said, everybody should start to understanding how far you hit the golf ball.
Yes.
I deal with a lot of people on a daily basis that will, send in, I think the unit's going, this thing's reading about 10 yards short, 15 yards short. I said, okay, let me look at your data. And they're saying, I hit a 7-iron 180. And I'm looking and I've said, you've hit 28 shots with a 7-iron and you're hitting at it 160. I said, unfortunately, I'm not seeing ball speed, spin rates, or launch that will match up to a 180 carry distance. So everybody should start out by going from lob wedge to your driver in your bag and understand your carry distances. And I would say do that 3 times a year, because I know for myself, my carry distances is totally different this time of year versus summertime. And then when I get to fall and winter, it's going to change. So understanding where I'm at in my game, I think is a huge positive. And I think people can benefit from just understanding carry. And the second point is golfers, and I'll struggle with it myself from time to time, is feel versus real. The average golfer struggles with a slice. That's pretty typical. So when they're out on the range, they'll either listen to, 100, 200 videos on YouTube on how to fix a slice. And, they're thinking, oh, I feel like I'm swinging from the inside. I feel like I'm drawing it. But video is not backing it up. And if you have a launch monitor, this will tell you instantaneously, your path is still going way to the left and your club face is open to that path. That's the reason why you're hitting a draw. That's why you're hitting a slice. If you change those data parameters by, getting a path out more toward the right and a face close to the path, that's the proper way for a draw. So this helps eliminate that guesswork and feel versus real that a lot of golfers really struggle with on a daily basis.
I know one thing when I was able to work for Landmark Land Company back, I mean, this is 35, 40 years ago, and they had a lot of Pete Dye golf courses. And I had to learn to hit distances on the fly versus hit some distance and roll it up to where it needed to be at the end, because Pete puts a lot of trouble in front of you. And a lot of golf courses are just, lovely green expanses, and you hit the ball out there and it goes as far as it goes. And most people don't even know how far their ball goes.
Yeah.
And so, when you think you're hitting to a distance, like you said, you're really not hitting to that distance. You're hitting less than that, and you're rolling. And depending on the kind of golf course you play, you better be able to hit to a distance, because sometimes you have to hit to a distance. Sometimes you have to take a club and a half more.
Yeah, exactly. And what I think this ties in perfectly to a product that we launched earlier last year as well. Again, a lot of people struggle with taking their range game and indoor practice out to the course. It may have to do with how they practice. A lot of people will just hit 50, 60, 7-irons and a few wedges, and then they're out on the course. Well, how many times are you going to be hitting a 7-iron on the course when you play 18 holes? Maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times. If you're hitting the vast majority of your shots out on the practice range, with one club, it's not really going to transfer over. But what we have come out with last year is the Flightscope i4 rangefinder. This is a very unique product in and of itself, in that it will give you direct distance and slope. But what this does is it connects to our FS Golf app via Bluetooth, and this will give you a club recommendation based on your ball data out on the course. So 3 ways you could get the data within the FS Golf app. You can go through a club grouping session if you are a Flightscope user. So you can use a Mevo Plus, Mevo Gen 2, X3C, go throughout all the clubs in your bag. You hit 5 to 10 shots. That will average the carry, launch, and spin data parameters. And then you'll be able to save that recent session. And then when you get on the course, you'll be able to see, your effective distance and club recommendation for that shot. Another way is you don't have to be a Flightscope user in order to use the i4 rangefinder. If you go to a teaching professional and they use a different launch monitor product, you can export a CSV file from a recent session that you were on, import that into the FS Golf app. You can get your distances that way. The third way, and I think this is a way that a lot of people will use it, is called our smart gapping. Again, a lot of the average golfers, they don't really know how far they hit it. They might have a good guess. So we just say input a carry distance for your 6 or 7-iron to the best of your ability, and select all your clubs in your bag. And this will be a model of our ballistics model and our AI that will generate carry, launch, spin characteristics for all the clubs that you selected. And then you get out on the course and you can use it that way. And another cool feature is once you're connected to the FS Golf app, it pulls real-time weather reports from the local weather station every 5 minutes. So you get accurate, weather conditions out on the course. This helps measure air density, air pressure, and you can manually toggle the wind feature on the rangefinder. So
that's a Bryson DeChambeau kind of calculation.
So funny enough to say that, the technology that is incorporated in the i4 rangefinders through our environmental optimizer. And that came from a discussion our founder and CEO had with Bryson when he was on staff for us at Riviera. Right. I'll tell this story really quick. I can't remember what hole it was. It was a par 3 down the hill. Bryson was playing with Tiger. It was 200 yards, and I believe Tiger hit a 6-iron, and it just barely got to the front of the green.
Yeah, it's probably number 4.
Yeah, and Bryson hit a 7-iron and came up 15 yards short. And he said, I called it good. What's going on? And so he hit another golf ball, came up 15 yards short. And so he was trying to wrap his head around, well, why is it coming up short? And our founder and CEO, Henry, said, he thinks he knows what the issue is, but let him go back and, really just sit down and plot this out. And what he come up with, the air density, air pressure was affecting Bryson's golf ball more than Tiger's, because Bryson launches it higher with a little bit more spin,
Yeah.
and that's what was affecting it. And that's what came from those discussions. That's what eventually came from our environmental optimizer. So those discussions ended up leading to the technology in here too, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, if it was the fourth hole, as Gary suspects, that plays into whatever is coming off the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, that's a westerly facing hole.
Yeah, so you're going to be hitting toward the breeze or whatever it is that's coming that direction.
They got a lot of attention because they're putting in a tee and moving it back, and they're going to be able to play it at 270 yards.
Yeah, so I did see
that.
They
got the Olympics coming up, and they've got
the Women's Open.
Yeah, they got the Women's Open, and I think there's another major. They've got some big events coming up, so they're giving themselves the opportunity to really irritate a lot of professionals. So that'll be great to see.
280-yard par 3. That's, I will have no shame ripping out a driver on that.
Oh yeah.
Hole.
Well, Oakmont can play theirs the 8th hole like 308, and they did at the Open, and it's like it's a par 4 for me. I mean, who are we kidding? Well, Jordan, the customer, I would think. I mean, this is basically the most affordable, legit launch monitor. Instead of, it used to be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. Now it's down to $1,300, $1,299. I would think this is a great device, not only for the average guy who wants a launch monitor, but I would think pros and assistant pros would be scooping these up, because now it's way more affordable, and they can really use a launch monitor giving lessons. So are you expecting to sell a lot of these to the club pros and assistants?
Yeah, so I will say there is other competitors under that $1,000 price point. The only issue with that is it's not measured data. It's a lot of calculations. So let's say, for instance, you'd get a variance of like a ball speed of 2 to 3 to 4 mile an hour differences that you would see. Like it's close, but it's not going to be accurate. As accurate as like the products that are a little bit higher in that price point. Our data is measured. And like you said, a lot of individuals, whether it be, the average customers, but a lot of, teaching professionals, club pros, assistant professionals, they have gravitated toward the Mevo Gen 2 and even the Mevo Plus because it's very portable. You get accurate data that you can use both indoors and outdoors. And the biggest thing with all of our products is there's no monthly or yearly subscriptions. Once you add on the Pro Package of Face Impact software add-on, that's it. Like it's just a one-time purchase. So you don't have to worry about paying, sometimes some competitors charge like $600-$700 a year just to access data and to play courses. And that gets a little bit burdensome, for multiple years at a time you're doing that.
Yeah.
So like that's one thing that really separates us.
And just so people are clear, when you say a lot of these other ones are simply measured, what you mean is they're taking the numbers that the launch monitor finds at impact, the spin and the ball speed and all that, and it calculates how far the ball must have gone. Versus the Gen 2 is doing some of that, but it's also got the 3D Doppler radar and the camera, and it knows it's measuring how far the shot actually went versus the calculations where this is how far it surely must have gone.
Correct. And
that's a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's the lower price point options, it will give you a decent estimate of how far you will hit it, but for club professionals, teaching professionals, fitters, and, individuals that want to get better, they don't want to deal with estimates. They want to know exactly what is going on. And I think I talked about this last week with you, Gary, one of the features that really blew me away when I first joined Flightscope was face impact location. I seen when it came out, and that was the first thing I did was I wanted to test and see how accurate it was. So I went to, CVS or Walgreens, and I sprayed the club face with that foot powder spray. hit a shot, looked at the data that the unit provided, and it was spot on. I said, that's pretty interesting. I'm going to hit about five more. And I tried hitting the toe, the heel, high, low, and center, and it was plotting every single shot. And that blew me away, that you don't have to put on stickers on the club to get that data. You don't have to worry about the spray on the club face anymore. You get
I've never seen anybody do the spray on the range. I'd like to see that. I might do that just for fun.
So
that's
indoors,
a great idea.
So indoors, it's a whole lot better because that spray would eventually stay on a whole lot longer. You know, outdoors, hitting in turf and stuff, about one shot, the whole bottom half of the club face is already gone. So you have to constantly respray it. So it's kind of a burden, but you know, again, this eliminates that issue, and you get accurate data of where you hit it on the club face, and then you can see in return how where you strike it on the club face relates to your overall carry distance, your launch, your spin. So I mean, one of the things that we say at Flightscope is performance data you can trust. We provide the coach, the fitter, the student, whoever you are, all the tools necessary to be the best at your craft and help you get to whatever goal that you want to get to. And it's pretty cool to see the success stories of people that's bought our products over the years, and to see how much they've improved in their products, you know, improved in their overall handicaps throughout the year. You know, success stories from our teaching professionals that have, you know, won some pretty cool awards over the years by using our products. So it's pretty neat to be a part of it.
I'm impressed that you could take a club and hit it toe down, up, over. That's pretty. You must be a really good golfer if you can hit it in those places when you want to.
I wouldn't be lying if I said, as some of them I wasn't really trying to hit it. You know, it's just, you know, I'm a notorious heel striker on my club, so that's what. First shot was a little bit off the hill, and I said that's pretty standard for me. But yeah, it gives. And after I believe you hit 3 shots, it will give you a heat map on the club face to show you where your tendencies are. So if it's red, that's where your tendencies are the most. So it's, again, the data is pretty impressive what you get with our products.
Well, it was probably the coolest new product I saw at the show, when you combine all the things it can do, plus the price point, which is way less than all the, you know, the big time TrackMan units and all that were. So the Flightscope Mevo Gen 2, it easily fits in your bag. You can take it out in the course, and your foursome might be a little annoyed when you do it a few times, but they'll get used to it because it's not that hard to set it up. So yeah, you can use it anywhere. It's a cool device. So you should check it out. The Mevo Gen 2 launch monitor from Flightscope. It's worth a look.